Guys, welcome back to my horribly lit basement with no ceiling. Today we're going to be doing something that I have been really scared to do for a long time, and that is we're going to trim the trees. I'm going to be honest with you, I have not wanted to do this basically because I didn't want to screw the whole tank up. And I'm nervous about it because once we get in here with the scissors, we can't undo it, right? And so for those that don't know what's going on here, this is Monte Carlo. It's growing on these bonsai trees. It's not planted in soil. We're defying logic here, right? But it works. And it's one of my favorite aquascapes. It's what we did on a very large scale over in the big Ancient Gardens tank, the original one, and we recreated it on a smaller scale over here. Ultimately, what happens is the Monte Carlo just grows too much and it gets all overgrown and doesn't look like a tree anymore. So we look around this tank, we have a bunch of big blobs of the plant and we can't really tell that they're trees anymore. So we want to try and fix that today, and hopefully we don't just butcher the whole thing. I don't know what's gonna happen. We'll find out. I came in here probably a week ago and I added some of the Fritz algae clean out stuff to try and get rid of the algae that's up here, this weird stringy stuff that plagues some of my aquariums sometimes. Probably because this stuff is up at the top, very top of the water level is why it was promoted to grow there, but as you can see, it's pretty much dead. I can't zoom in on this when I have one hand in, but this is just totally dead stuff. It fluffs right off, and that's perfect. So we're gonna go through and we're gonna trim the top anyway, because I'm sure there's probably still some alive in there. It has been a week since we did that treatment, and we'll see what happens. Once we're done doing the work to this tank, I'm then gonna give you guys a complete rundown on this aquarium. Hopefully we can look at this thing and not be appalled at how weird it looks after I'm done trimming. Whenever we trim plants, we want to try and save as much as possible, and so I'm trying to find a tub that we can put some of the cuttings, the really good stuff from the Monte Carlo in, that hopefully we can reuse. We just have to find something. That'll work. Okay, wish me luck. Well, I think we did it, guys. Looking at the trees here, I think I did an okay job at trimming them. They don't look super bad. We'll talk about it a lot in a second, but I'm noticing that my filter, the outflow is a little slow. So I think we're gonna pop open the canister, clean it out, get the mechanical filtration a nice rinse through, give the mechanical filtration a nice, give the mechanical filtration a nice, give the mechanical filtration a nice, give the mechanical filtration a nice rinse off, and then hopefully everything will be back to normal. But as you can see, the Frucata rainbow fish are loving the tank. They got a little bit more room, I think, at least underneath down here in these areas of the trees. I think it's looking pretty good. This is what we were able to save from all the trimming, guys. I know it doesn't look like a lot for what we did in the tank, but this is a ton of Monte Carlo. We could start probably a whole 50-gallon tank substrate with this amount. If you just come in here and break off little individual pieces of these long strings that we have, then you could cover a decent amount of substrate. And that's hopefully what we'll do if we have a new setup arise where we want to use this stuff. Otherwise, we can leave it in this tub and it'll stay good for a while. I mean, like a week or two. Ideally, you're going to want to preserve this stuff kind of up out of water. That way it has all the access to CO2 that it wants. That seems to keep this plant happy, especially if you're going to store it long term. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at our filter down here. I forgot that we had a light bar back here. We'll have to move that in just a second once we take care of the filter. So this is a Waza Thermo FiltoSmart. Okay, so we have the built-in heater, which is awesome to have. It keeps it out of the tank, of course, and then we just have to pop this thing open and clean out the mechanical filtration media. Unfortunately, the filter that we have under there is not a Biomaster like this one right here. These are really easy to change the mechanical filtration or clean it out. You just have to open this thing, not completely, not from the lid side of things. This one's all over the place, but all you have to do is flip these two tabs over and then you can pull this piece out and then clean it. So you don't have to take the whole lid off and worry about maybe there being some water or anything. Whereas what we're gonna have to do on that one is take this whole thing up and do some work on it. So we got our sponges cleaned out, guys. Pretty good for the most part. Now, instead of just putting them right back into the filter, I'm gonna do something a little weird. You might have been able to see it, but just from pulling those sponges out, we knocked loose a ton of detritus and gunk that was in the filter, and that's now sitting in this water, probably down at the bottom. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna siphon the water out of this into the bucket, try and collect as much of that as possible from these two compartments, and then just refill it with tank water that we already have in the aquarium. I'm not gonna touch any of the biomedia or anything that might be loose in there. We wanna preserve that, and I'm just trying to eliminate the amount of crazy gunk that's gonna come out of the filter if we just put those sponges back in right now and then started it up. Even if that does happen, not the end of the world. It's good bacteria that's just gonna end up back in the filter eventually, but I don't know, we're gonna try this a little bit differently this time. Yeah, okay, so look at this, guys. This was just one volume of our canister filter emptied out in here. You can see it's already starting to settle really quickly. That's all the big material, but like, this is gold, okay? This is really good. This was stuff that was required by the filter to do its job. So while, you know, it's one theory to get rid of this stuff, I don't really subscribe to that. If this ends up back in the aquarium, so be it. It's actually probably good for it to do that. What I'm trying to do is prevent a bunch of physical material that's just waste, and it's uneaten waste and material from the filter from ending up all over my Monte Carlo. So I know some of you are probably like, oh my god, why are you doing that? That's the good stuff. You're right, but we still have all of our really good stuff on this media. So by cleaning this out and getting rid of this, we're not doing anything bad to the filter. We're just trying to prevent the physical debris from ending up in the tank. Everything about our system is going to be totally healthy and fine. It looks like we got out of here with minimal spillage. The towel certainly helps, and it also certainly helps to know how to go about doing these filters. When it's your first time, if you don't know all the steps, then it can be a little bit of a nightmare. But with these Waza canister filters, even the FiltoSmart, since we don't have that easy removal component to it, which I'll show you guys in another video, but with these, all you have to do is twist, and then it shuts off the water in here, so it can't spill out, which is what happens to a lot of people with other filters, and I don't know how other filters work, but that's the easy disconnect of this. Give it a twist, and then the water isn't going to fall out, and then it loads it, so when you put it back in and lock it into place, then you don't have to go and self-prime it again. It also looks like we didn't get a ton of turbidity in here. There is a little bit because some stuff did come up when I went and poured fresh water into the filter, or water from the tank. So that's something to keep in mind. It's impossible to have it be perfect, I guess, in this situation, but we are looking like we have some good flow again. Let's pop that up. So that's looking a lot better than it was before. These are canister filters that don't have a super crazy high flow rate, and that's okay. All we want is a little bit of surface agitation, and that's what we get from these filters, and that's why I use them. So we'll go ahead and close this up. We'll let the water get a little bit more clear, and then we'll talk more about the tank. Alright guys, now that our tank is cleared up, we can actually take a look at it here and inspect our job that we did here on the trimming. You can see some of these areas, the Monte Carlo was already dead from having that algae choke it out, but then in some of the areas I also cut it pretty low to expose some of the plants that were not getting sunlight. So you see a little bit of yellow there. There's some on that tree as well. And that's really just par for the course here. I wasn't expecting everything to look perfect right away, but I think it looks pretty good. Let's start here with the tank. This is of course a water box aquarium. All of our tanks pretty much down here are water box tanks, and this is a 36 by 20. So think of it as like a 40 breeder, but taller, and I think it's a little bit deeper as well. So we have 20 inches of depth, whereas I think a 40 breeder is 18. But anyway, regardless, it's a super, super awesome tank for aquascaping because it has that depth. That's why we love the 40 breeders. This one just gives us more water volume, more height, and a little bit more depth. So I think this comes out to be around 55 or 60 gallons, something like that. We have the black stands, of course, and you can get a few different types. They have the wood grain, there's a more of a beige color, and then there's a lighter one, whatever, you know, fits. If you're gonna put this in your living room, whatever matches your existing furniture, there's lots of choices. So if you're looking for a new rimless tank, guys, check out Waterbox. We got a link for them in the description, of course. We've already done a lot of stuff with the filter. You know it's an Awaza Filto Smart. This one is a 200. It's also a thermo, so it has the heater in there, and I think it works out good for this. If we had a lot of fish and we didn't have a planted tank, I think you'd want to run at least a Filto Smart 300, if not getting up into the Biomaster series to handle whatever kind of fish load you have. But let's go ahead and let's talk about the light fixture. So this right here is an ONF flat 1 LED. It's 36 inches roughly, or it fits whatever the millimeter dimension is for this tank. It's a little bit different. This thing is super classy, very high-end. It's an expensive fixture, unfortunately, and it's going to match everything else that we have over here on our tanks, but it's a really powerful light. It's hard to tell on camera always, the lighting intensity, but this is only on 75% power right now, and it definitely creates a high-light environment even down at the substrate, with it not even being on full power. So I think, in my opinion, these things are worth the money, but it definitely is a pretty decent investment. Because this is one of the newer ones, it is all app controlled, so you can set it on its own daylight schedule. So it has a period where it ramps up in the morning and then it goes into its full daytime mode, which we have set for I think like 5 or 6 hours, and then it goes into a slightly warmer, less intense color temperature for the evening. While we don't need super intense lighting for the Monte Carlo, I think it definitely does help having this kind of strength in our light. And we also have CO2 because we're, again, trying to do the Monte Carlo not in the substrate, and because we have a little bit stronger lighting to help balance everything out. I think that CO2 is really important in this tank. So I just have a kind of a plain diffuser there in the back. It bubbles up and I try and get it to get pushed by the output of the filter. All of our CO2 stuff is CO2 art, and we have a 5-pound regulator. We have the 5-pound tank, and we have the 3-way regulator. So we got the green line running to the tank over here. The middle one goes up to the crazy waterfall tank that looks a little nuts right now, and then our other one goes to our other tank that looks nuts right now. Since we're running CO2, I also like to make sure I have a little drop checker in here to make sure that we have an adequate amount or if we have too much. So I prefer these little U-shaped ones that sit over the edge. I think they're pretty much the most stylish drop checkers. They're pretty unintrusive and I just like them a lot. So we have those on all the tanks down here, and that's just going to help us make sure we have enough CO2 in our tank. Substrate is pretty self-explanatory. We got the brown contra soil in here. I think it's mixed with some Brightwell stuff as well from the original time that we set up this tank. So substrate, I think it lasts a lot longer than people think, and even so, even if it's not as good as it was 6 months ago, it still works. Like, we got plenty of hair grass down in here, and I think that this stuff can last a super long time. I'm having some memories too of us adding laterite clay to this as well, so you can see a piece there that popped up. We got a coolie loach hanging out, slithering through the grass there. But we have that as kind of like a base layer mixed in with this stuff. Again, this substrate is super old and it's been through a couple escapes, so not surprised that we see that kicked up there. But that's the substrate. I believe we have just a bunch of dragonstone in here, which the trees are sitting on. So these are bonsai trees that come from a mix of different places. Flip Aquatics, I've gotten them from Boost Plant, and I got one from a trade show that I think this piece is broken off of. And collectively it fits together to make this. So these are all branched bonsai trees compared to the tabletop kind that look like this. I prefer the branch style. I think they're a lot easier to work with, especially when you're doing Monte Carlo. So besides the Monte Carlo, there's obviously hair grass. We got some Anubias Nana Petite in here, and then that might be all. I think we did have some moss in here originally, but that stuff right there is mini Pellia. There's a few dabs of it kind of super glued to things around here, and super glue is an important part of this whole thing. I know that sounds kind of weird, especially if you're new, you haven't heard of using super glue in aquariums, but you can totally do it. It's safe as long as it cures, then you're all good. And so that's really how a lot of these trees are fixed into place. Like this one is super glued to a few pieces of dragonstone that hold it in place, and then a lot of these bigger ones are also just super glued to rocks, and that keeps them down. They eventually waterlog, but once you get all this Monte Carlo on there, even if they're neutrally buoyant, they'll float up because they have all that plant mass up there. This guy's digging around looking for something. When it comes to the substrate, you don't really need to vacuum it out or do anything to that. I think that's actually a little counterproductive, but at least in this tank we have kind of a dead zone back here. So when detritus and stuff collects down there, I do get in and do kind of like a light vacuuming just to suck it all up, and that I think it helps a little bit, at least aesthetically. I don't think it really negatively or positively impacts the environment all too much. We decided to keep it really simple here with the fish, guys, so we just have, I think there's like 9 or maybe 12 of these Fucata rainbow fishes in here. So they got the really pretty yellow fins, the blue eyes, and you got to get up close to really capture all their beauty, but they're awesome, awesome fish, and I want to get more of them in here. I think that would look cool. And we saw them earlier, but we have, I don't even know how many coolie loaches we have in here. I think there's 6 of them, but they like to hide. Sometimes they're back here by the filter intake in this corner. Seems like they only like to come out like after I do water changes, then they start getting crazy, swimming up to the top, or when I feed. But of course we're not doing any of those things right now, so you'll have to just trust me and know that there's more than a few in there, and they're a cool fish. For some reason I thought they would work well in this tank, and they have. Sometimes I catch them trying to burrow into the trees up here, which I thought is kind of an interesting behavior, kind of cool. Something, like this is nothing they would experience ever in real life, or in most tanks for that matter, so I thought that was cool that they were taking advantage of the aquascape. Oh, and we got some nearite snails in here as well. They are supposedly good at dealing with algae, obviously not that type, but we don't see a lot of stuff on the glass of this aquarium, and maybe that's because of them. I like to think that, at least. And that's kind of the whole story with this tank, guys. It's been pretty low maintenance. I mean, we let it get a little out of control there with that algae up at the top. We have a little bit of rehab to do with the Monte Carlo up there, but I'm excited to see if we can keep the algae off of it and if we can get it to green up a little bit. So I'm not sure how the plant is going to react to the trim, but I think overall it should be fine. We went ahead and we turned the CO2 up a little bit more because we did have that turned way down low to help slow the growth of this stuff, but now we actually want it to grow again. Now that I'm confident we can trim it and it can still look good, I'm excited to see what happens. As always, guys, check out the Sticker Magnets Cling store. We got our laserfish cling on here, as well as a Cory cat, and then we have an AutoCat sucker over there, and then down here we got our Coolie Loach to match our wherever our Coolie Loach is down here. These things just peel off. You can also use stickers too. Our stickers are super nice and don't leave behind residue or anything. So check the store out. It's a great way to support. And I think that's probably it. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new. And next time, maybe we'll clean up the sand waterfall tank and get our waterfall started again. Those things are a pain in the butt lately. Anyway, thanks again, guys, and we'll see you next time.